And we're back. You already know what time it is. It's R3's time where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3. We're Eyes, We're Lives, Realize, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. What better way to do that than to read, write, and comprehend for your own overstanding? So, of course, we're jumping right back into it. We are reading Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks. Very interesting book. If you didn't catch our post, I should be posting it later, but we were at a Juneteenth event where we did a giveaway of a lot of books. We'll go over that later at the end if we have time. But we gave a giveaway about books, and we also told you a little bit about the history about Juneteenth. So make sure you look out for that video as well as one that's going to be coming up next week. But anyways, back to the book. We are the Real Book Club where we read. And so Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks is about self-esteem and Black people. The chapters we're going to be reviewing is chapters 5 through 8. And I'll pass it over to the hostess with the mostest to tell us a little bit more. Then we'll come back and we'll jump back into it. To you. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Oh.
You were frozen a little bit, but yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, maybe you didn't. So, back to you, host.
Oh!
I'm like, Melody heard me, right?
Moses coming at you to R3 Real Life Book Club. You can get us at R3 Real Life, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, as well as on the website, where you can like, share, follow for free. We also accept donations on the website. And if you click the link on the website, you can see all of our campaigns and what we're doing. And you can also register so that you can get updates. Right now, Rock My Soul, by Bell Hooks, chapters 5 through 9. In chapters 5 through 9, Bell Hooks moves from diagnosing the roots of low self-esteem in Black communities to exploring pathways toward healing and transformation. She argues that historical oppression, spiritual disconnection, fractured relationships, and unresolved psychological wounds continue to impact Black life. However, she also offers hope, emphasizing self-awareness, community, accountability, mental health, cultural affirmation, and love can help individuals and communities reclaim their sense of self-worth. The chapter uses to try to see healing as both a personal responsibility and a collective struggle. Some key things. Chapter 5 is spiritual crisis and community breakdown. Many Black Americans have become disillusioned with religious and cultural institutions. I get that. And once provided guidance and support, the loss of spiritual grounding can create feelings of hopelessness, isolation, and emotional instability. Chapter 6, Beyond Racial Movements, Hooks critique traditional racial uplift movements by focusing on external achievements and respectability, and self-acceptance, foundations for healing. I remember reading one part where I can't remember exactly how it went, but she discusses how a lot of Black people after Reconstruction and between civil rights were trying to make changes, and some people, there was a fight the power that was up, just straight Black power, and then there were people who would send their kids to historically white institutions, and so then they felt ostracized because it was this group of kids that did not know what was going on. They might have lived in places that were multicultural, they might have lived here, but their grandparents lived directly with them, with white people who during the period before Reconstruction, so they had a different mindset, and then the kids sit and go to school, and they're kind of confused. So they're in this in-between world on how they're supposed to live and how people react to them. And then there is the whole Black power. There was nothing in between to try to bridge the gap for these kids who were kind of lost in the South, per se. But anyway, Naila got me the last time because I was talking too much. So this time, I'm going to shoot it back to you at R3 Realize. Check us out. Back to you, kid.
No worries. Everyone can talk, okay? Okay, so great. So you touched on a few things. Chapter 5. Let's read the titles. Chapter 5 is Refusing to be a Victim. Chapter 6 was Thinking Critically. Chapter 7 is teaching values. And if you were great, even if you weren't, you got to chapter 8, spiritual redemption. These chapters are actually very in-depth, so they encompass a lot. I see a hand go up. So we'll kind of review. We'll start with chapter 5. We'll kind of jump around. I really want to touch on some quotes that bell hooks have that are very important that we read directly from the author this time around, and then we'll discuss a little bit. But Melody, your hand's raised. Go ahead.
So, first of all, I don't know how we got to chapter 9 so fast, because I literally thought we were doing through 7. I'm not sure if I missed
No, chapter 5 to 7. I said 8 if you were great.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that, and then second, I am a little behind, but the reading it, like when a lot of the talking about integration
Mm-hmm.
in the earlier chapters, and how that made both sides feel. This book is making me do a lot of self-introspection, being a mixed person, having a white mom and a black dad, but being raised in white schools with white neighborhoods, right? And so, like, it's making me check, okay, did I assimilate that? Did I assimilate that? How do I feel about this? It's really making me do a lot of self-evaluation, and I'm not sure I like it. So there.
I was just gonna say, well, that's good, but if it probably is good ultimately in the long run, but while you're in it, it probably makes you uncomfortable.
It's it is very uncomfortable, because I'm checking values, right? And as you start, like for me, as I started hanging out and being more a part of Black communities, then I started realizing a lot of things that were in my head about Black communities, about Black people, even though I'm Black people, were put there by white people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's like a struggle to make sure that you're being true to your Black side, not just accepting things that you've been taught, especially when you were a child, if that's all you were surrounded by. Mm-hmm. So I like this book, but yeah, that's why I'm behind, because I spend a lot of time thinking and talking to Walter about stuff like, what do you think? What do you think about this? What do you think about this as it relates to me? What do you think about? So we're spending a lot of time like doing that.
Well, that's good. That's good, though. Self-reflection as well as building up that self-esteem in your Blackness. I think that's a good point to make, being biracial and having to navigate those spaces, because she mentions that as Blackness being something that is always looked at negatively or in different lights, like you said, too. And that thinking is developed by a white perspective. So seeing that applied to your life and being able to kind of unravel that will be deep. But I think that's still, that's very good. Maybe you can share some of those things later.
I'm glad we chose it. I really am. I was just saying when I said I don't like it, because I think it's very eye-opening and very, it's a learning experience. So good choice, good book.
But I just wanted to say this, and I'm going to let you continue, Naima.
Yeah.
I think that society puts things on you, and then you get programmed, I guess, that's the word. I don't know if that's the right word, to believe or say certain things. So I heard something that's kind of not related to you, but to this situation, but this guy was interviewing somebody, and he said, what's the most racist term that you could think of? And he said, an expat. And he said, how is expat, a racist term? And an expat is somebody that comes from the United States and living in Ghana, or you're living in Europe. You're an expat. But if you come from what's considered a poor country, and you come to the United States, then you're an immigrant. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh. And we just use those terms. And so that's probably a lot of what people are, helps you hurt your self-esteem, because there's certain things that we just say without even realizing the context behind it. But I was like, wait, there isn't a difference between an expat and immigrant. What? They're the same thing. An expat is an immigrant, but you don't call them immigrants if you're coming from here. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Go ahead.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting. Look up the definition of expat.
It's just somebody that comes from a. I will.
Yeah, and then just to read the textbook definition of expat and immigration, or immigrant, I should say.
It says anyone living and working outside their native country.
An immigrant is
That's the same. Immigrants, expat versus immigrant. The primary difference, expat and an immigrant, is intent and permanence. That's it. It's the same thing.
So, yeah, same thing, but different, because, for example, black people, which is why, a lot of times people think we're not liked around the world because black people are considered immigrants, right? Expats. Like, when we go to, Liberia, when all those expats went to Liberia, they weren't accepted as a part of the culture and being permanent citizens, right? Because they were expats. They were going there working, and everybody wants to be in America. So, like you said, coming from a poor country, you're an immigrant, you can gain your permanent residency because this is the best place to be. But reverse roles, they just see you as working and being able to help that society and not the reverse. So that's actually interesting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look into it.
Exactly,
yeah, it's a racist. Yeah.
And I never thought of that. I was just like, oh, I didn't.
And it possibly is to keep black people in America, if you think about it, because you can't go somewhere else unless you denounce your citizenship in the first place. I'm going to be looking into that. You can't go. You see, this is what I be thinking, and then I'll jump in the book. You can't go as an American, a black American that barely can afford to live in America. You can't go to another country and make money without paying America. So it's still you're a slave to their system, even if you decide to leave, and you have to denounce a citizenship that you didn't ask for in the first place. Yeah, you have to denounce. In order to avoid that, you have to denounce something that you didn't ask for because they stole you and your ancestors, then forced you here, then started a whole revolution and called it the United States of America and made you a citizen and said that basically you can't leave, but you got to work for wages. Remember Juneteenth speech we read, read the fine print. And then when you try to reverse the roles and say, okay, I want to go to Africa, I want to go here. Well, you still got to pay us unless you say you're not American, so you lose the benefits of being American. So it's kind of like, yeah, anyways. You started that conversation. So on chapter 5, just to kind of piggyback off of that, refusing to be a victim. So it starts off on page 69 saying no black person in the United States can have any measure of self-esteem if he or she has not cultivated the capacity to be a critical thinker, to live consciously. So that conversation we just had is actually good and interesting because it's allowing us to think critically of different terms and the way they apply to life, and having that colonized mindset and trying to decolonize the way we speak about things. And remember, that was in Frantz Fanon too, when we read about black skin, white mask, and how we need to speak about ourselves in different terms and decolonize that thinking, right? So it goes on to say, used politically in relationship to governments, the term decolonize means to allow to become self-governing or independent. I think that term even that we use, and we're trying to change the way we speak about ourselves. It's kind of hard for a black American at that, because we aren't really allowed here in this country, at least, to be governing and independent. If you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, look at Black Wall Street, right? And they burn down everything that we develop. So that is a very hard thing, on top of self-esteem and being able to have that identity of self. She brings up the term, Bell Hooks does, on page 69, but chapter 5, she's going to bring it throughout, about critical consciousness. That strikes me. I won't start with my paper that I'm going to be writing, but I wrote about subliminal consciousness, which is consciousness beneath the threshold of unconsciousness, right? So when you're thinking about critical consciousness, you're thinking about how you can critically think about the conditions that you're in and why you're in it, and not really be a victim to that, which is going to be in chapter 6. She mentions a book in the 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. He identifies consciousness as the basic tool of survival, the ability to be aware of the environment in some form at some level and to guide action accordingly. I think about ancestors that came way before us and the way that they were able to build civilizations, even though other people think they gave it to us. They were able to build civilizations, right? And being able to have that critical consciousness on how to survive where they're at. We just recently went to go visit the Maasai, right? And just thinking about how the Maasai still use their ancestral ways, building fires, hunting, going out, using things from nature in order, the gourd that they had to preserve the milk, the way that they use refrigeration in a way where they're able to put fire inside the gourd to make it hold milk for long periods of time. Things like that are critical consciousness at work and in play in real life, and we don't think of it as such so much when we're here in America. So I like that she brings up that term, critical consciousness, and that's important just to leave in the back of our minds as we progress through the book, but even after. On page 70, the second sentence as well, she says, critical consciousness is a process by which we reflect from that interrogative standpoint on our awareness of reality. For example, most Black people are conscious that we live in a racist and white supremacist society. This is a basic state of awareness almost all Black people hold. Critical consciousness is at work when we are able to utilize our knowledge of this reality in ways that circumvent racist exploitation and oppression. So that's pretty self-explanatory. On page 71, the second paragraph, she says, gaining civil rights and economic prosperity led many Black Americans to relax both their critical vigilance in relation to whiteness as well as their awareness of the importance of living consciously. Explaining the nature of living consciously, Nathaniel Branden writes, living consciously implies respect for the facts of reality. This means the facts of our inner world, our needs, our wants, our emotions, as well as the outer world. A few sentences down, I highlighted wishes or fears or denial do not alter the facts. I always say that. I had to say this at work. Someone said, you shouldn't feel that way. I said, my feelings are my feelings, and you're never going to make me change that. A fact is a fact, and a lie is a lie, and the way I feel about it is not going to change either. So wishes or your fears or denial does not alter any facts, and we need to be aware consciously of the facts of reality. We do live in a racist society. How do we circumvent that? How do we build self-esteem in order to, I want to say revolt, but to counter that, is what she's talking about in that. On page 72, the third paragraph, this is second paragraph, fourth sentence, looking for a period, third sentence down. She says, this embracing of victimization was a response in part to the nation's willingness to extend a helping hand to those Black folks who did not appear to be self-determining, militant, or decolonized. All too frequently, lots of Black folks found that if they played the role of a victim, assuming an almost minstrel-like persona, they were far likely to receive attention and handouts than if they demanded justice, accountability, and reparations. I think that is important to note with critical consciousness. If you think about how once Black people refused to be a victim, right? We refused. And when integration happened, okay, people were going to integrated schools, and that was happening, and desegregating, right? But then when that Black Power movement arose, and people became more militant, demanding respect, demanding justice, demanding equal pay, Malcolm X times, right? The Black Panther Party times, Martin Luther King times, we started switching out of that role of victimization, and that's what made us be more of a target. Bell Hooks also makes a note, which I always speak about, is how they take out all of our Black leaders that teach us to speak up, and that is to put fear inside of us and the lack of self-esteem within ourselves to say, oh, well, we shouldn't speak up, we should just be thankful for what we have and integrate into society calmly so that we won't be looked down upon. And then once you are integrating, you're quiet and you're not so militant, demanding justice, because, what's his name? COINTELPRO. What is the president's name? He did the COINTELPRO. He basically said the greatest threat to American society is the rise of a Black Messiah. I'll think of his name when I'm finished talking, if anybody can Google it. He's the one who wrote the COINTELPRO. Okay, and so having that self-determining factor makes you look like an enemy, someone as a threat to the American system. Taking away that and just saying, okay, I'll get what I get, makes you look like you're a victim. So we're in a fine line in between victimization and being militant and self-reliant, self-dependent, is what she's talking about. She also mentions a book that we may read, John McWhorter's Losing the Race, Self-Sabotage in Black America. We're not going to read too much of that. Okay, on page 74, second paragraph, she says, while I am in agreement with any social critic who holds the opinion that way too many Black folks have embraced the idea that they are victims with no agency, it is clear that the refusal to assume responsibility for self has reached epidemic proportions in the society as a whole. That's the reason why actually this R3 was founded, right? I found the need to educate Black people, but also America and the world about the history of the Black contribution around the world. Black, I mean, just shortened, Black African contributions around the world, because it's time that we take back that self-responsibility on how we can change or how we can further our lives in order to be in order to have more integrity within our culture, within ourselves. But it starts on an individual level, and then it goes on to a community. And she talks kind of about that too in these chapters, if you guys are reading along. On page 75, she mentions the term confirmation bias. I think this is really big as well to think about as Black people, about the confirmation bias. So she gives an example. She says, when it's talking about psychological terrorism, right? So she says, for example, on page 75, many Black students who enter predominantly white educational structures, believing themselves the equals of their white peers, when repeatedly treated, however benevolently, as second class, not only begin to doubt their equality, many begin to perform on the level of racist white expectations. A confirmation bias is then put in place. White teachers expecting Black students to perform less well than their white counterparts convey these beliefs in both conscious and unconscious behaviors in the classroom, and usually get the less than equal results they expected in the first place. You must be watching something. Let me mute you. Okay. So it's talking about how when once you're in these societies and in these systems, right, with white people, they expect Black people to fail. They expect us to do bad, so they want us to be victims and need all this help. It goes into me thinking about Dr. Umar, how he says a lot of the Black boys and girls don't need special education. They need their own education, right? They need to be taught by someone who understands their culture and who they are. Similar to my pawpaw, having a very big concern about literacy rates in Black students overall, but Black boys, and not getting proper literacy in school and reading and being able to write and understand what they're writing and understand what they're reading, which is causing a lack for them to pass standardized tests overall, which gives that victimization again back to the Black man and woman, or Black woman, girl and boy, that we're victims and we need a helping hand, rather than teaching our children what they need to know from our own perspective as the Black community. So not having those systems in place to help educate the Black students as well. So those are both conscious and unconscious behaviors she talks about too. So let me jump down just to read out loud some books that are very important. So she says, poet and educator Haki Madhubuti, then named Don L. Lee, published his insightful treatise From Plan to Planet, Life Studies, The Need for African Minds and Institutions in the early 70s. He called on all African Americans to decolonize their mind and live consciously. And then the last paragraph, it says, our collective failure to create a culture where positive self-esteem is the norm for all Black folks requires reevaluation and revision. While small enclaves of Black nationalists continue to uphold the principles of Black self-determination, which is Kuji-Jakalia, a principle in Kwanzaa, they have little impact on their lives, on the lives of most Black people who are integrationists. A theory and practice of self-reliance must emerge that addresses Black folks and the complexity and diversity of our experience. Then we can create a culture of accountability where the choice to live consciously can be freely made by all. So again, us establishing our own systems, our own schools, right? And being able to apply that and give back to ourselves the self-determining factors, the self-confidence, the self-reliance as well, she talks about. So thinking critically for chapter 6, I know that thing is going to tell me I'm out of time soon, so I'm speeding through. If you guys want to jump in, let me know. Thinking critically. So an excerpt from this book on page 87 for this chapter. It says, in 1972, Don L. Lee declared, to entrust the minds of our young to Europeans is equivalent to blowing their brains out ourselves. For all we will receive in return are brothers and sisters who are confused about their identity, purpose, and direction, and in effect have been tortured to a slow death. That sparked me, because I've always said this, and I say this to most people, that ain't Yes, I said ain't. Ain't no teacher ever taught me anything that I didn't already learn at home or learn in a book or knew about myself. I was just there because my mom had to work, so I considered it babysitting. And I still consider that to this day. Like when you go to certain schools, right, and you're in college, unless you have a knowledge of self, which is R3, we promote knowledge of self through education activism. Unless you have a knowledge of self, you're going to be indoctrinated into their way of thinking, that white perspective of thinking, and anything that challenges the status quo of whiteness is something that's looked down upon. I've had teachers try to fail me. I've had teachers try to give me bad grades because I spoke about what they said. I spoke against what they said. In college, I remember in LA, and the teacher said that we're all mutts, and she was trying to be so controversial and so inclusive of all the white kids, and then I had to raise my hand, and this is the story I can tell later at a broader. I raised my hand and stood up, and I said, I don't know who you talking to, but I ain't no mutt. And everybody just looked, and they were like, what? And she was like, well, that's not. I said, I don't care what you're teaching. This is English class anyway. I'm not a mutt. And let me tell you the definition of a mutt. And I challenged her. That same teacher even tried to fail me, and she got a good look at who I was, because I think I have critical consciousness, and that wasn't going to fly.
Sometimes you do, like, okay, when I was doing the master's program in transportation, now it was all about transportation, bus, rail, but 90% of my papers, I somehow talked about transportation, but I always integrated the unhoused, homeless, youth, teens that don't have housing into the transportation. And one teacher did ask, well, we're talking about how we can build a better transportation. And I said one way is the parking lots that are not full, to put tiny homes on there for unhoused people. They could be close to transportation. So I always tried to do that, and I was different. It was like,
yeah, or and then even too, when I went to community college and we were reading Kindred, and teacher didn't know I already read that book, but then he had us read this book, and I'll never remember, and he was I was so pissed off because he said that Kindred was a love story. We have 8 minutes, so let me wrap up. Kindred was a love story, and I challenged him in class, and we arguing back and forth in front of everybody because I never cared. And he said, well, write it in your paper and tell me why it's not. And I sure did write in my paper, and he gave me an A- because he didn't want to give me an A+ because he wanted me to not be able to conceptualize what I was trying to tell him and make him understand it. And I noticed that because the people who basically agree with him got A+, and he gave me an A- and wrote some grammar issues on my paper. And I was like, grammar does not take away from my A+. You know that I got you. I challenged you. I was able to explain myself in depth why it didn't matter. And so anyways, that way of thinking, if you allow someone in a white thinking that is used to actually dehumanize you and keep you down, the society that we live in, and that perspective to make you teach your children, then you might as well cause them to just go ahead and take it from there. And that's what that quote is about, right? So, and yeah, that's what that quote is about. So I want to speed through on page 90, kind of what we were talking about. Just her little, at the last first paragraph, last sentence, she says, Black students are acting in self-destructive manner when they repudiate all education, but low self-esteem makes it easier to reject the faculty education that is offered rather than do the work, which Black folks did in the past, of taking the learning that was needed for our advancements and leaving the rest. And so you always take what you need, maybe a new insight, maybe a new term, and then leave the rest for the Western perspective and thinking. On page 91, she brings up the term Western metaphysical dualism. I won't get into too much of that. We don't have time, maybe next week. But that logic is at the heart of any binary racist thinking, to have that dualism, Western metaphysical dualism. So look that word up, and we'll come back to that next week. And then the second paragraph, I highlighted the second to last sentence. People with healthy self-esteem do not need to create pretend identity. She was talking about how basically, they call it code switching, right? So code switching. I wouldn't necessarily say I code switch, which is why I probably go the way I go in life. But having to be a different person at work, which is why a lot of Black people still to this day, which is not realized, we still are segregated. The most segregated time in American history, I believe Martin Luther King said it, is on Sundays. because white people go to white churches. Malcolm X. Was it Malcolm? Okay, Malcolm X. White people go to their white churches, black people go to their black churches, but it's also after work. After, dealing with society, you go back into what? Your family, your households, your barbecues, because they is not invited to the barbecue. At least not mine. But, so that is what it talks about. We don't need to create pretend identities, but we do need to find a space, Bell Hooks is saying, where we can be ourselves, fully self-actualize in whatever setting that we find ourselves. And I think that's important, of having self-esteem within yourself, being confident in yourself of who you are. If you speak differently, you have a slang, you have an accent, shoot, you might cuss, because sometimes I cuss, and I have my grandparents know that I cuss. Okay, so being able to be yourself wholeheartedly and have that self-actualization. And then the last pair, we're not going to probably get to the rest, but I'll read the last sentence here on page 92. It says, if black folks want to be free, they must want to be educated. Without freedom of mind, there can be no true and lasting freedom. Now, just to wrap up, since we have 4 minutes left, we still can review chapter 7 and 8, but we'll do it next week. I wanted to read chapter 7. As you can see, I highlighted it and put R3. So we'll just read this first page here. Racism in education, both in context of materials and in the manner in which knowledge is presented, has made it almost impossible for institutions of learning to educate for critical consciousness and provide African American students with the skill to be critical thinkers that is needed for healthy self-esteem. However, I highlighted the failure to create a learning context that can foster the self-esteem of African Americans cannot be blamed on institutions. The organic learners and intellectuals can educate themselves for critical consciousness if they have mastered the skills of reading and writing. The Real Book Club. One of the most submersive institutions in the United States is the public library, where citizens can find a fountain of knowledge that they can utilize for their personal growth. I highlighted that because my mom actually, Hostess with the Moses, one time I was at school and she always wanted me to find communities. And I said, I don't have time to be paying people to teach me stuff. She said, well, go to the library. Won't you just go to the library? And that is where I really started to develop my own knowledge of self and being able to read and teach myself. By going to the library, picking up books, and it was Wari, what is her name? I'm gonna look up the book, but it's one of the books that I picked up and just kind of started, besides the other ones that I've always read, but it sparked more of this R3 in me back in 2013, 2014. She says, examining the educational history of African Americans moving from slavery into the present day, it becomes evident that a central focus was and is placed on learning to read and write, because it is these skills that prepare us to enter the world of knowing that begins with knowledge contained in books. Slave narratives chart an amazing history of appreciation for reading. For the book among the slaves, indeed, particularly in relationship to the Bible, reading was a transformative experience for many early African American revolutionaries. Reading, combined with the questioning that is the heart of critical thinking, led enslaved black people to question the authority of the oppressor, to question the system. Critical thinking empowered enslaved African Americans to interpret the Bible in ways that affirmed their essential humanity and their right to freedom. And the link between reading, critical thinking, and self-actualization is the onset of us having that self-confidence and self-esteem. So I'll end there because we don't have much time left. Make sure you guys read. You have 1 minute to wrap us up. Again, we're R3, we're Eyes, we're Lives, we're Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. The best way to do that is to read, write, and comprehend for your own overstanding. To you.
Yeah, you can get us at R3 Real Lives. That's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, as well as the website. As you were listening, we're reading Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks. Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks. So get on the website, like, share, and follow us for free at R3 Real Lives. You can donate. You can join a book club. You can try to sponsor a scholarship fund or one of the other campaigns we have. But most importantly, like, share, and follow for free at R3 Real Eyes. 3, back to you.
All right, perfect. And if I can squeeze in these last 2 quotes on page 103, positively, there are book clubs that are working to re-stimulate progressive discussion. That is the Real Book Club. And then if we are to see a change in the collective self-esteem of black people, reading and writing will need to be once again a central focus of racial uplift. Again, we're R3, We're Eyes, We're Lives, We're Lives, nonprofit organization where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. You're tuned into the Real Book Club. We will see you next week where we say 3. Let's see if I can get them before it hangs up. 3.
3.
All right. See you guys. Bye.